I just noticed I was still on mute. We're live. Hello, everyone,
Yeah,
and
we are.
welcome to Red Bookshelf. My name is Saul. That is Josh. Josh, how you doing?
I am doing good. I hate you because this book is so daggone good, but also goes over some touchy subjects such as death. But the sports writer, the writer, shout out to Mitch. This book is amazing.
Hmm?
Long story
Uh,
short.
Do we want to go into a little bit of non-spoiler thoughts because we are going to be spoiling this book? So if you have not read after we finish the non-spoiler thoughts, go read the book and come back. This is nonfiction; it is real life. So
Hmm.
unlike when we'll get to what February's book's going to be, that one will be more fiction sci-fi. That's more of a spoilery type of book to go over. This one's less so because it's real life, but if you are worried about being spoiled, we want to give that warning up front. But first off, Josh, non-spoiler thoughts.
Um, this book was so well written on how it was structured, and it because I've we've all written memoirs. We had to for school and all those type of things, but it's so hard to pin it correctly. And Mitch did that, and it really drove across his relationship with his one of it. What arguably is his, according to the book, is his second dad in the way it was. Like, this was his father that wasn't his father. We all have those mentors in our life that we really didn't realize that we had until certain things happen, and then it draws you back to those mentors. Morrie was that for Mitch, and Mitch beautifully wrote how Morrie always meant to him in college, and then he went off and did the real world. The real world owned him for a
Mm-hmm.
while, and then he saw the Nightline with Ted Koppel. That's kind of a little spoiler in the book, but he saw he something drew him back, that drew him back to his relationship with his old professor.
Mm-hmm.
And his professor is doing something that no one thought at the time, and still to this day, is I want to approach death the right way. And this book eloquently and beautifully touched a subject that we never like to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and it made you feel okay with it, which is something I never thought I would say about death. But this
Right.
book made you feel it's okay, but you it's like the sixth this book was the sixth stage of grief to me, is the way to put it.
Mm. What's funny about our editions of the book? So I have the 10th
Yeah.
anniversary,
I have the
eh,
25th.
and you have the 25th. So they're two completely different afterwards in the
Right.
book that we actually read to each other before going live. But this was a book that I initially read when I was a teenager in high school. So it's interesting to come back to a book that was impactful on me as like a kid, pretty much. Even though I was a
Hmm.
teenager, I was still a kid, and then now reading it as an adult and going back and now experiencing more life, coming back to some lessons that sometimes you need those lessons.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to read Morrie's books himself,
Yeah.
because he was an author himself on more sociological and philosophy and other things of that nature. But yeah, this was a very, very impactful book, a very short book, and
Mhm.
it's one of those that you can pack a punch in a short book. A lot of times with longer books, there's the phrase of earn your pages, and this book here earns every single
Yeah.
one of its pages.
Yeah.
Um, but this is nonfiction.
Hmm.
We're gonna first go into characters, the real life people,
Right.
but I'm gonna throw this over to Josh to talk about the two main characters of this book.
Yeah. So the author of this book is a
Also,
writer
hi
known,
Brennan.
hey, Brennan, is known as Mitchell David Album, which Mitch Album is the actual author of the book. Or as you know, and if you read the book, he starts off as Mitchell, and then more is like, "Can I call you Mitch?" like during his open enrollment. Is when he's taking roll, and that's just a cool little just writing thing that he did. But not knowing when Stoll was like, "Hey, we should do this book," I was like, "Okay, cool." Didn't realize Mitch Albom was like one of the OG sports reporters. If anyone knows about the sports reporters on ESPN, that was before First Take. That was like the first, like, we get some talking heads together and talk about sports. They didn't debate in a sense. Yes, they had some disagreements, but it wasn't like I'm right, you're wrong. It was more of just articulating the sport in a positive way, or at least articulating the sports in a way to which you understood it more on a ground level. So it really, the show was great. That being said, as an 8-year-old, it was boring as hell. But I didn't know what I was watching until I got older. Hence, this type of book to relate to this is Mitch didn't realize that teaching Morrie was teaching him until he got later in life and realized, oh, I need to go back and revisit that. Okay, that's how we bring it full circle on this. And so to show you a little bit of how the sports reporters are, for those who don't know who Dan Le Batard is in the sports world, you're going to see him very young right now. But yeah, Mitch is in the colorful tie in the gray suit as they just kind of go through talking about this is in 2003. This book was written in what, 1990? This was published
1997.
7? Yeah.
On some great levels there yesterday. And first of all, you never like to give glory to the big guys up front because nobody knows their name. But the fact is, if that was the best defense in the nation, they opened holes in them for Chris Perry that doesn't deserve the accolade best defense in the nation. John Navarre played terrifically and did not lose that game for Michigan, absolutely. Chris Perry won it for him, in my mind.
Ohio State can't win a game in which one of the teams is scoring 35
No,
points.
I was going to say, up until yesterday, Dan, they looked like they thought they could win the national championship without ever actually scoring an offensive touchdown. And even at 28-21, they're still lurking in this game, and then until Michigan finally put them away. Chris Perry's a wonderful football player.
Yeah, Chris Perry, I mean, made plays there that you just didn't see before. But you do have to give a nod to Navarre. I don't know if people know the whole history of this guy, but, you know, from the time he came in, there was all kinds of criticism because people still wanted Drew Henson to be the quarterback, and they couldn't believe that he left to go play baseball. And then he didn't deliver in a couple of big games, and despite the fact that his numbers were good for all the rest of them, if you don't beat Ohio State in Michigan, that's what they remember. And finally, in what would be his last game, you know, played at that stadium.
Talk about Ohio State, Michigan.
Still Ohio State, Michigan, guys. But yeah, that's just kind of like the gist of it. But yes, Ohio State and Michigan still the greatest rival in college football that it is. But yeah, that just gives you a sense of how sports reporters were. Did you not realize that there was a bunch of like here's why you're wrong and here's why? Like you saw,
and they're all in suits. They're all in
suits. They're all just diagnosing the game and putting it in an articulate way, like a writer would do. And
Dan Le Batard is so young.
Dan Le Batard is so young.
As someone from Miami who still watches a lot of Dan Le Batard, and Dan Le Batard is a legend down here, I'm like, oh my God, look at him as a youngin.
Yeah, but Mitch was born in New Jersey. He lived in Buffalo, New York. Obviously, just all around there. He is of Jewish descent, and obviously, as we know in the book, he graduated from Brandeis, where he met Morrie as a sociology professor there. And then he wanted to be, I don't know if you want to go into that much of his life, but he wanted to be he really wanted to be a concert pianist. That's what he wanted to make it as. And in the book, he tells about the struggles that he went to and to decide to switch to writing and mainly sports journalism, which as soon as I was reading the book, I'm like, wait, I know this guy. And then I saw his picture. I'm like, yeah, I know this guy.
Which the main reason I picked this book and enticing Josh to read more books, I was like, oh, he knows who Mitch Albom is. And I thought he was going to get the connection immediately. And he didn't until reading the book. And then also because it is a shorter book. So I was like, oh, Josh will be able to get through this. And it was so funny that before we started recording, he was like, I didn't realize that this was the Mitch Albom from the TV. And I'm like, wait, what? Really?
Because you think that this type of subject, I didn't relate it to the sports reporter guy. Like I didn't, but yeah, he was part of my youth. He was up there with, you know, the Stuart Scotts, the Rich Eisens, Like all those ESPN guys that I, instead of Sesame Street, I was watching ESPN. So I grew up with Dick Schaap and John Saunders and Mitch and Bob
Which
Ryan
is why
and
I
Mike
thought you would
Lupica.
know.
Right, but I just didn't make that connection because it's been forever since I've I would anytime Mitch was on a podcast, I'd listen to it. Still didn't register that it was Tuesday with Morrie writer. Like I don't know why.
Yeah.
Just some of those things.
Speaking of Morrie,
but yeah, speaking of Morrie, I will play this clip from Morrie interviewing with Ted Koppel, which he talked about. Mitch talked about in his book. And we'll go with that.
I don't know if we have time for me to tell you the story about the wave. It'll take about 2 minutes. Want to hear it? There's this little wave, this heat wave, who's bobbing up and down. I'll shorten it. Bobbing up and down on the ocean, having a great time. And all of a sudden he recognizes he's going to crash into the shore. And this big wide ocean, he's now moving toward the shore. And we get annihilated. He gets so despairing. My God, what's going to happen to me? And he's got this sour, despairing look on his face. Along comes a female wave, bobbing up and down, having a great time. The female wave says to the male wave, "Why are you so depressed?" The male says, "You don't understand. You're going to crash into that shore and you'll be nothing." She says, "You don't understand. You're not a wave. You're part of the ocean." That's what I believe.
You're part of the ocean.
That's right. I'm not a wave. I'm part of humanity.
So you're not going to die?
I'm going to die, but I'm also going to live on.
And he ain't wrong with that declaration of that he's going to live on, because ever since he passed away in the early 1990s, we are talking about him now in 2025. So, Morrie, you ain't wrong.
Ain't wrong. Yeah. This, as you said earlier, Mitch is a sociology professor who was diagnosed in August of 1994. 1994, best year.
Best year cinema.
Diagnosed with ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, which Mitch even talks about as like, of course he would get a disease that was named after a baseball player.
Yeah.
But ready to get into the story? This is going to be the full-on, more spoiler-ish parts of this book. Again, this book, as I said earlier, not very a spoiler-ish book, but because it's life. But anyways.
Yep.
We start with the curriculum. This is how the book starts. The last class of my old professor's life took place once a week in his house by a window in the study where he could watch a small hibiscus plant shed its pink leaves. The class met on Tuesdays. It began after breakfast. The subject was the meaning of life. It was taught from experience. No grades were given, but there were oral exams each week. You were expected to respond to questions, and you were expected to pose questions on your own. You were also required to perform physical tasks now and then, such as lifting the professor's head to a comfortable spot on the pillow or placing his glasses on the bridge of his nose. Kissing him goodbye earned you extra credit. No books were required, yet many topics were covered, including love, work, community, family, aging, forgiveness, and finally, death. The last lecture was brief, only a few words. A funeral was held in lieu of graduation. Although no final exam was given, you were expected to produce one long paper on what was learned. That paper is presented here. The last class of my old professor's life had only one student. I was the student. So after reading that first section of the book, like, where did you think the book was going to take you? What was your thought process on, like, how this book was going to go for you?
Eventually, at first I was like, oh yeah. So like Mitch was in his life the whole time, after that, it's like, oh yeah, Tuesdays morning. I spent every Tuesday of my life. Like, this guy was so impactful in my college years. I'm totally going to keep up with him his whole life. That wasn't the case. Like, all of us, when we leave college, we're like, yeah, man. And then you end up only seeing each other at funerals and weddings, that type of thing. So when I read that, I'm like, oh, is this that rare breed where you leave from college and say, yeah, I'm going to catch up with you, and then you actually do? No, Mitch was the rest of us in life. Even though Morrie always stayed true to what he was.
Yeah. And you saw then in the afterword of the 2007 one where he writes, I forgot Morrie remembered, when
Mm-hmm.
talking about he called Morrie coach when
Yep.
he was in college. But then when he called to visit him, he goes, "Hi, I'm Mitch Albom, and you taught me in the 70s." He's like, "Why didn't you call me coach?"
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is one of those things, and one of the themes of the book is not keeping in touch. And we get that not just with Morrie, but then also his brother, who we
Mhm.
find out is going through cancer at the time. So
A lot of pancreatic cancer in this book.
how did you feel about that theme of keeping in touch with people and getting back to people that you've lost touch with?
Yeah, it's just one of those, like, that was the main thing, is like when I'm reading this book, I'm like, dude, I got to call X, Y, and Z, like
Mhm.
as I'm reading this book, because it's like Morrie in this whole thing is he's not he went straight from 1 to 7 as far as his grieving stages. Like once he got his diagnosis, he went through stage 1, and I think he just jumped to like acceptance in like 2 seconds, according to the book. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't really know, but according to the book, he went from 1 to like 5 to 6, because like I said, this was like that extra one. But he and like his whole, like, I don't know if the syllabus or whatever, but his whole, let's just have, instead of, because the funeral thing of
Mhm.
let's, there's a quote, I forget who said it, is people always talk about you the best when you're dead. And
Mhm.
Morrie was like, F that. Let's just do,
Have a
because I
living
already have,
funeral.
let's do a
Yeah.
living funeral. And let's have everyone come in that appreciates me, which is, people will sit there and like, oh, no, dude's dying. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't know he could drop dead tomorrow, because especially ALS during the 90s, you
Yeah.
didn't really know at that time, and we still don't have a cure for it till this day. But especially during the 90s, you really didn't know. It was still brand new in a sense, even though it was Lou Gehrig's disease, which was like in the 70s, I think. But you just got the situation where Morrie jumped ahead when death is staring you in the face, that typically people didn't do, which I found really well. And then also, just when you have those relationships in your life, they're always there. All it takes is a phone call, is
Yeah.
what I learned from that. Long story short, I know I rambled there for a second, but to answer your question, we're all victim of it. We all have
Mhm.
really good, great relationships, mentors that we had throughout our life, and we grew away from them.
And we've learned even Morrie himself. We learn even Morrie himself is victim to it as well, when he
Yeah.
later in the book talks about a friend that he lost contact with, and then
Yep.
the friend passed away. And so that's a regret that Morrie himself has. So
Mhm.
as much as like we're reading this book and you're like, wow, he's like an infallible man, goes, no,
We all
he's
have.
human, we're all fallible.
He's learning from it. We just haven't. This was the first time that someone put it on paper of that
Yeah.
situation that we've read, at
Yeah.
least.
And then Mitch finds out from Nightline TV, which you showed a little clip there, goes, how did you feel about the happenstance of him watching TV, seeing his professor on there, and that being the catalyst to start the Tuesdays with Morrie?
This is gonna sound weird, but they kind of got real spiritual with that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas he wasn't seeking out Morrie, and Morrie really wasn't seeking out him, but somehow or another, some grander thing, Morrie took that Morrie took that diagnosis to have his reaction to his diagnosis, which led to people talking about, dude, this guy's dying and he's so happy about it. He just wants to talk to people about it. That led to Nightline. That led to Nightline to going on the television, and Mitch seeing that, which resulted in this book that we're still talking about in 2025. So that's what floored me about the whole thing of I'm making those connections, and I'm like, all right, I don't care if you're spiritual or not, but that's some divine intervention stuff that is really cool.
Yeah. It was one of those things of, it really is just happen chance. Sometimes you're in the right place at the right moment. You can think of it as coincidence. You can think of it as God. You can think of it as whatever belief system you have. But the fact that that was how they were reacquainted is still crazy to think about.
Yeah, that because at first I thought, like I said, when you were asking me, of like, I thought it was just going to be, oh yeah, just here's my recounts of like every Tuesday until he died. It's kind of like that first little bit, and then you realize, no, I went away, and I told that professor, I'll never forget him, and then I did, and then I just happened to watch. Of course, back then there wasn't a whole lot on TV in the '90s, but there were still more than 3 channels. And the fact that he just happened to have it on, which it makes sense since he was a writer. He has to keep up with the news and stuff and how it relates to his stories. But still, he saw that. It perked his but Mitch reached out, and then, like you said, Morrie was like, "I thought you called me coach," because it was like I've been waiting for that phone call.
Yeah,
and that it gave me goosebumps. I'm
fell
like,
in this place because also, as a writer, he's part of the union. The union goes on strike, so that gives him time.
That's true. The union
to even go visit him as well.
Yeah,
like he's not in that time. He's not working, so he can go visit his professor. So it's like literally everything just fell into place.
Even though he should have just hung up on his person that was writing that story instead of accidentally dropping his phone in the floorboard.
Right. That was before they went on strike, but still, yeah. Right. And one quote that I have here, and we're going to go through several quotes. I wrote a lot of quotes down. It was like, people see me as a bridge. I'm not as alive as I used to be, but I'm not yet dead. I'm sort of in between. I'm on the last great journey here, and people want me to tell them what to pack. So when you hear that, how you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, this book hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, just, no one likes to talk about this subject, but this book made it feel okay at best. It's still heavy, right? So it's like, and the fact that you're seeing this person just accept it so quickly, and then just being like, yeah, it's part of us. It's what we do. But I'd rather live my life to the fullest instead of just withering away and going away from someone. Mm-hmm. And so just Morrie's just reaction to his diagnosis, and I know this is a long-winded answer, but Morrie's reaction to this diagnosis is something that I understand why this book is lasting the test of time.
Yeah. It is truly incredible, and is a truly incredible mindset. Let's go into some of these lessons. So we got the first Tuesday, the first lesson, we talk about the world. And Morrie speaks about how when watching the news or reading about the news that it makes him cry, that he feels more towards them because he himself is suffering. So he feels the suffering of other people, and kind of showing Mitch too there that it's okay for men to cry. Yeah. And apparently Mitch was writing in the book, he goes, my professor has been trying to make me cry since like we were in school, and he finally gets it at the end of the book. But through this whole time, Mitch hasn't cried, and Morrie is someone who's not afraid to cry. So in that sense of like, you're getting into that first lesson, the first like real chapter of what the lessons that Morrie is going to teach. How did you feel about the men crying part and the feeling the suffering of the world?
Well, in 2025 is a little bit different. In 1994 or 7 or whatever, whenever they were having in 95, like I understood where Mitch was coming from. Like, if you were crying, it means you were vulnerable. And if you were vulnerable, it means you have you're mentally unstable. You weren't fit to do anything you were supposed to do. That's kind of how it was back in 95, even as a 7-year-old at the time, 8-year-old at the time. But that's just kind of how it was. And then but Morrie was like, no. And it kind of brings me to the Jim Valvano quote of the best day is if you can think, you can laugh, and you can cry. What a great day. Like, as soon as I read that, it reminded me of that Jim Valvano quote that he said when he was also dying when he gave that speech at the ESPYs. So once, like with Morrie, Morrie's like, yes, he's just glad that he could do that, and he can still feel when this disease is overtaking him. It's him being able to still be in control.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. And Mitch at the time was like, no, I got to stay strong. And that's what you've always been told. You got to stay strong. You can't show any weakness. And the time is, that was Morrie's strength, is being able to do that because his body is overtaking him.
Yeah. And you being shown too that was just always Morrie's philosophy, even before being diagnosed, that he was someone who was okay with his emotions and showing his emotions. And so that's very ahead of his time.
Yeah, it was.
And I'm glad that we live more in a time where people are able to freely,
especially with reading about his childhood in the book, where his dad was just like, fuck you, basically, according to the book.
I don't think his dad was fuck you. His dad was an Eastern European man who like had to work hard and live through the Great Depression, and
he got that lived through
lived through the First World War.
It makes sense where his dad came from, because we all read about those type of people. It's like they went through a whole lot of shit, and now you're wanting me to show empathy. No one showed empathy to them, so why would I show empathy? Dad did seem cold, Ryan.
Ryan puts dad seem cold. Like my dad is completely different from his dad in the book, but when I read it, I was like, I kind of understood of the time period.
Yeah.
And we've all read and heard stories about men from that time period of, like, especially all the things that they had to go through, hiding and concealing their emotions and not being allowed to feel. So then they don't show, they love just as much as everyone else, but they're not able to show it. And Morrie even said, like, he wanted to show his kids that it's okay to feel your emotions and to fully love things.
What was his stepmom's name? Eva or something?
Yeah, I have it written down when we get to but
sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but that's
you're jumping ahead. We go into then the second lessons of we talk about feeling sorry for yourself, and Morrie reveals that he does feel sorry for himself, but he only allows himself to feel sorry for himself when he wakes up in the morning. He'll wake up in the morning, he'll feel bad, he'll cry about it, he'll and then he goes, and then I'm gonna I felt that emotion fully, and now I'm gonna put it over to the side. And as I was reading that, I was like, this is something that I literally was talking to my mom about, of that, like, I'm starting this newer thing of, like, if I'm angry about something, or if I'm like, I let myself fully feel the emotion and then I put it aside and let it be. And so I was reading this and I was like, maybe that was just something old from Morrie when I was a teenager, that then now I'm taking that lesson in this time. But he puts in, it's horrible to watch my body slowly wilt away to nothing, but it's also wonderful because of all the time I get to say goodbye. Not everyone is so lucky. So I have a would you rather here for you.
Okay.
Would you rather watch yourself have a slow, painful death, but get to say goodbye to all the people you care and love? Or would you rather have a quick, easy death, but you're not able to have that goodbye with the people you love and care for?
I would take the former, honestly, because I would rather experience life and really put a button on every relationship. Yes, I may suffer, but it would make the suffering easier knowing that than just immediately that's how it goes. And then you're like, but wait, I have so much, I need to tell that person this. I need to tell that person that. Time is the greatest gift we ever have. And whether or not you're suffering through it or not, the fact that you can spend time with the people that you care and love is way more important than you having a quickly death, to me.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to tell the people that you love them.
Yep.
Love you, Josh.
Love you too. Fuck you for making me read this book, by the way. If I haven't said it already.
It's just 11 times. And then I love, we get a specific chapter later about culture, but I love every time he goes to Morrie talks and he goes, the culture. And I was saying beforehand, Mitch himself is a boomer. He's 2 years older than my parents. And the way that like Morrie was talking about the baby boomer generation, I was like, that's the way baby boomers are now talking about millennials. And I was like, oh, things aren't really changing that much. So there was still a connection there of, even though it was different generations. What did you think on that part of just like, they're talking about boomers, but it kind of felt like they were talking about millennials too.
People always sit there and say like, oh, you don't understand. We never understand. But the thing is, if we don't talk to each other, we're never going to understand anyway. And so the fact that Morrie and Mitch, because I mean, the whole thing of Mitch leaving and being like, you didn't think about him, and Morrie's still doing what he's doing. And then they come back and they hang out, and it's just the whole thing of like every generation still has their mentors, still has their loved ones, still has their elders that they respect and they look up to. But you unfortunately just move on with your life and don't realize how much they impact you. So even with the baby boomer, you might not agree with them politically or all that stuff, but connecting them on a loving level and just enjoying spending time with them, that's what I got from this. Yes, at the end of the day, it broke Mitch away from all the pop culture crap and all, like it's today, just keep your nose in the phone. And that's the biggest problem we have in today's generation or society, is just be in the present and not of what's happening on your phone, which I was a victim to this Christmas. I was so attached to doing fantasy football, not realizing my whole family's in front of me. And that's what
you were also on way too many teams.
Yeah. So this again, but so was Mitch. Mitch was a part of a lot. He had a lot of shit going on as far as his sports reporting, and he was involved. And he said in the book, that's why like the whole time he was 37. He was involved with multiple things. I'm like, gosh damn it, Soul. What the hell are you doing to me? Was this like
I didn't mean it that much, but it was happen chance.
Yeah.
Just like Mitch watching Nightline.
Maybe just slow down, realize who actually gives a shit about you, and reach out to them and live life to the fullest.
And then Ryan is agreeing with you here. He goes, agreed, would not want to just be gone and the people left not being able to say goodbye. Yeah. So yeah, an agreement there. Since we already talked about like Ava and kind of just a little bit of the background of Morrie living through the Great Depression, and we get a little bit about like his relationship with his father, and then his new Romanian stepmother Ava, who saw education as such an important thing, and even herself went to night school to learn English, and kind of is one of the reasons why Morrie himself pushed himself so much in educating himself. And the part of the story too of this, like during the Great Depression, his father like is trying to get him a job, and they go to the factory and there's no work for him, and he's like, oh, thank God, because it's so crowded in there. I don't want to work this job. But he was willing to do it for his family, but the fact that it wasn't available to him, he was just like, oh, thank you. And he made the decision that he would never allow himself to make money off the sweat of others, that he didn't want to do any work that exploited other people. So I'm going to push to you there on just like any other stuff you want to talk about from like his background that you got in that chapter.
So Eva was the biggest influence on the Morrie we see today is what I got from just kind of go back to that and why he had the same situation. Like, I don't want to work in that, environment, but that's not what Morrie felt was what he wanted to do. Right. So a job is a job. We've all worked those jobs, right? Like, I don't want to be, no one does. You think the person next to you wants to be here? Hell no. We want to do something bigger. There's something greater than what it was. But Eva instilled to him the softness and kindness that led to the Morrie that Mitch met when he went to Brandeis. Because it's nothing against his dad, like we talked about. Like, his dad went through life. No one else was giving him the comfort. Unfortunately, and so his dad was just doing exactly what he was told. And when Morrie went to that place, he was doing what he was supposed to do. He just happened to not get it. But he was independent enough to do what he needed to do. But yeah, no, that whole factory thing, yeah, that was part of life. And we've all had those like dead end jobs. He didn't get the job, but that's the main thing. I know I'm wordy as hell, but still.
You wouldn't be you.
No.
Kind of going into one of his other, so we're going to skip a little bit, go to the fourth Tuesday. We talk about death.
Yeah.
And he goes, the truth is, Mitch, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live. And Morrie speaks about people walking through life half asleep, doing things we automatically think we have to do instead of fully experience life. That through dying, you strip away all that stuff and you focus on the essentials. He goes, even I don't know what spiritual development really means, but I do know we're deficient in some way. We are too involved in materialistic things and they don't satisfy us. The loving relationships we have, the universe around us, we take these things for granted.
Yeah. So until you're there, like this is the chapter I'm like, I want to relate to it, but we can't.
Yeah.
But I'll take your word for it. Like that was the one thing I was like, I mean, it's heavy, but I just can't relate to it because we're not. Fortunately,
we're not currently dying. Yeah,
we're not currently dying, so it's tough to really relate to it.
But I do agree with his sentiment of us being very materialistic and us, and a lot of people 100%. Walking through life, as he said, half asleep, just doing what they need to do.
When you are facing death, I get where his point of view is of like, I can't take this, like,
you can't take it with you.
You can't take it with you. And I've unfortunately have had those conversations. We've all had those conversations, or at least not conversations, but at least from our elderly loved ones who are reaching those type of Morrie ages to where they're like, can't take it. Like I've had, elderly family members being like, here you go. I'm like, don't give it. I don't need this. They're like, can't take it with me. And I'm like, shit.
Yeah. And then their junk just becomes your junk.
Well, not that, but yeah. I mean, I've got this pen on my desk is because my grandfather was like, here, take this. I'm like, but you like this? He goes, can't take it with me. And I'm like, because the thing is like, I don't want to face that situation. And I don't want them to face that situation. So that's why, again, I say, fuck you for making me read this book.
And then we get in a little bit more about family and a little bit more emotions on the 5th and 6th Tuesday. But the part that I want to jump to now is when we get to the professor part 2, where we learn that before Morrie himself was a professor, he worked at a mental hospital in Washington, D.C. And that Morrie observed that most of the patients there had been rejected and ignored in their lives, made to feel that they didn't exist. They also missed compassion, something the staff ran out of quickly, and many of the patients were well off from rich families, so their wealth did not buy them happiness or contentment. It was a lesson he never forgot. And when Morrie and other professors learned that students would lose their deferments during Vietnam War, they were like, we're going to give all the students A's. so that way they don't have to go off to war. So learning a little bit more there about adult Morrie, about him being one of the only people really noticing. You get a story about a woman who she would just lay on the ground every day. She'd wake up, go and lay on the ground, and then get up and go to sleep. And Morrie's like, I'm going to sit with her on the ground. And she finally like sat up, and then he befriended patients, and people were like, don't befriend them. They're crazy. Like, but he had so much compassion for people that he wanted to show them kindness, even though they were in a mental hospital. So the Professor Part 2, your thoughts on that section?
Morrie was Patch Adams in this whole chapter. I was like, wow, is Patch Adams based off of Morrie? There's also a movie when I watched in college in my psychology class where there was a kid with autism, and their whole, of course, this was back when no one really knew. It was kind of the same thing with Morrie and ALS. No one really knew about autism in a sense. And so they would just sit there instead of just feeding them with drugs like most mental institutes would at this time, the one flew off the cuckoo's nest type of situation. Instead of helping them, they would just keep them in one place and just drug them up, and then, until they passed away. Morrie was like, no, let's figure out what's going on and see if we can get them to a normal life. Patch Adams type of situation. Like, let's just relate to them, laughter, all that stuff. And then with, I forget the other point I was trying to make, but help me out here.
The Vietnam War deferment?
No, not the deferment. The PTSD, like that's just tough to, that they just want. A lot of people and unfortunately you'll see just a lot at that time was, if you had a mental disorder, they would just drug you up and leave you in a corner and not try and help you. Morrie always in this book just seemed to be someone that was like, no, let's go. And then,
open himself fully to people.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Brought me back to the point of when I was watching that movie, the parents of the autistic kid would mimic his motions and stuff. Like, he would rock and stuff. So they would mimic that. And to a point where they would keep doing it. It was a true story. And then finally, just one day, they were like, okay, let's just try this. Because no one knew. Like, they were just experimenting with it. But they were trying to relate to the person. Mm-hmm. To like break them out. Like, yes, I'm here for you. I'm, just kind of thing is like just trying to pet and trying to show compassion to a scared dog in a situation, that situation. And at the end of the movie, the kid just broke out of it. Now, it's a movie, whatever. But with Morrie, this reminded me of that situation of just like, instead of just throwing him a bunch of drugs and leave him in a corner, the straitjacket stuff, let's try and really diagnose what's going on and help him out. And that's what Morrie did in this chapter.
Yeah, I'm going to put this up here. Gift saying group hug. So he's not saying F you to me like you did, but he's saying group hug about this. Gift, are you going to come in later when we bring Discord people on?
We are. What time are we bringing Discord people on, Sol?
In just a little bit. We're, kind of just go through a little bit of the rest of the book, and then we'll bring people on to give their thoughts on it. But get a little bit fear of aging, money. There's this long quote that pretty much like just talks about like money. It's not everything, kind of. And then I loved the quote of the love is how you stay alive even after you're gone.
Yeah.
And the one chapter that back then when I read it as a teenager and then now like as an adult that I can't really relate to at all was the marriage chapter, because I am not married. But
me either. That's like, I'm like, hey.
I was like, good sentiment. Maybe I will relate to this chapter when I reread it in the future. But we kind of go through, and this is when I thought about the parts of like, are they talking to boomers or are they talking to millennials right now? Was the 11th Tuesday we talk about culture. Because people are only mean when they're threatened, and that's what our culture does. That's what our economy does. Even people who have jobs in our economy are threatened because they worry about losing them. And when you get threatened, you start looking out only for yourself. You start making money a god. It is all part of this culture. Look, no matter where you live, the biggest defect we human beings have is our short-sightedness. We don't see what we could be. We should be looking at our potential, stretching ourselves into everything we can become. But if you're surrounded by people who say, I want mine now, you end up with a few people with everything and a military to keep the poor ones from rising up and stealing it. And then another quote I have from this chapter, the problem, Mitch, is that we don't believe we are as much alike as we are. Whites and blacks, Catholics and Protestants, men and women, if we saw each other as more alike, we might be very eager to join in one big human family in this world and to care about the family the way we care about our own. So, what did you take away of the culture back then in the 90s that can kind of be representative of our culture today?
Because I don't want to get political. I want to be more sociological here. So I'll take it back to this. Is with me, my family is everything, and my friends are everything. That's how it's always been. So, but yet I still get distracted in the fact that I want to support my friends and family so bad, as you know, when I bragged that one time. I want to support my friends and family so bad that I want to make as much money as I possibly can so I can support them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, that's not how society is.
This man, just a side note, when we went to Nashville, he paid for all of us at a barcade for us to play games and to drink. He was like, it's all on me.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm that weird guy that wants that likes for other people, for my friends and family to, because the thing is, when I was growing up, my family supported me, and even my close friends back then supported me. So it's the thing of, help thy neighbor type thing.
Yeah.
In this situation, society is telling me that I should tell everyone to just get yours. Screw them, get yours. The thing is I've been reciprocated enough, and I've been supported enough in my life. Now, granted, what that chapter is about is 90% of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think I'm part of that 10% that have that support of family and friends, that you want to give back as much as you can to your family and friends. And you want to help the charity cases that you can, but you're still skeptical, right? Because you don't know what the bottom line is. Once you know somebody, then yeah, you want to do that. But that is still going on.
And we, in our Discord hangouts, join the Discord down below. But in our Discord hangouts, we've talked about how we are so much more alike than we are different. Because we have people of all political spectrums, and we are able to speak to each other with respect and about all that. And that's something that is very rare in our world, especially today. And so when I read this, I was like, oh, that feels like a conversation that all of us have had on Discord, of just like, we are so much more alike than we are different. If we opened our hearts and cared about other people, even if they think differently than us, then maybe we can all be better off together.
Yeah. It's the thing with, and that's what I like about our Discord, and everybody join down below, is that we are open, but once we see a red flag, we might check you on it.
Yeah.
We're not about that, because once we realize that, you're just the same type of, just a good person who wants the best, not just for your, and we want to support you as much as you want to, support us, and we're thankful for it. But there's a lot of red flags out there that are just out there. What's the underlying, what's the motive, and that's what that kind of chapter was about. was like, what's the underlying motive? What are you really trying to do? And unfortunately, it's a lot more.
And what is important to you?
Right. What's important to you? Are you like, to me, what's important to me is to make sure that not only am I cool, but mainly my friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank my friends and family who I grew up and have dealt with to keep me on that, did not stray me from that.
And to check you sometimes too.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I appreciate that check.
Love you. One chapter 2 that I really enjoyed was the forgiveness too, and then especially like forgive yourself as well. But before we bring people on, I want to talk about Morrie's perfect day, which is just the simplest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was simple, but it was perfect. And then also just the last, the 14th Tuesday, we say goodbye. And Mitch finally crying in front of his professor.
Mm-hmm.
And then his professor passes away, which Morrie did something that both my grandparents did, which is they refused to die while other people were in the room. So they literally, the second that no one else was in the room was when my grandparents each separately, one in
It's weird how that is sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, that they're like, I'm gonna hold on to this life until everyone is out of the room, and then that's when I will go on to the next plane. But yeah, the end of this book, your thoughts on perfect day, Mitch finally crying, Morrie passing away.
I mean, it's letting it all out. That's why, I mean, I had a conversation with a coworker today, and I was talking to her about The Wild Robot, and I was just like, you're going to be, like, shout out to Wild Robot. Amazing movie, go watch it. But I told her about, like, you know, I teared up a couple of times watching that movie. And she was like, it drains me if I do that. I'm like, you don't understand. And I quoted her the Jim Valvano quote because this freaking book was in my mind anyway. But I was telling her, I was like, just if you let that emotion out, you will feel not only relief in a sense, but it's an acceptance too, because you're holding back something, you're denying something that's happening. It's this 5 stages of grief. And once you know what it is when that loss happens. Yes, you're going to experience that emotion more and more, but that first, dam breaking.
Sometimes you always feel better after a good cry.
Yeah. And so, reading that last chapter, it was like I didn't want to turn that page. Because you knew you knew the inevitable, but you didn't want to turn it. Mm-hmm. And then it's the same thing of like you didn't want to cry, you didn't want to accept its fate, and then once you accepted it, you felt this weird
crying
relief.
definitely ensued.
The crying definitely ensued, and the relief happened.
Yeah,
and then you felt a different, not of acceptance or.
But a weight
was lifted. Yes, weight was lifted off of you. And it's so weird that reading this book, Morrie was accepting the whole way of that. And Mitch didn't accept it every step of the way. He knew what was happening, but he didn't want to accept it until it was finally there.
Yeah,
and then once he accepted it, it was a different way.
And then him at the end, I don't know how to say goodbye, goes, this is how you say goodbye.
Right.
And that part. But let's bring in our Discord members. This is the time. If you are part of the Discord, there is a link in there to come onto the stream. We're going to get the other half of Ruckus Wrestling to come up to give his thoughts on Tuesdays with Morrie's. Let's all welcome Justin Toner.
Yeah, I know.
Hi, guys.
How you doing, Justin?
I'm good. It's been a long day. I've been busy.
So give us your thoughts about this book.
A lot of the stuff you guys were talking about earlier, covers a lot about how I feel with the book. This was I knew this was going to be a very like emotional moving book, but it definitely it hit me in places I wasn't expecting. Like, because I was like, the way it was going, I was just like, okay, how long was it before I'm going to cry? And I didn't really cry until I got to the part where Morrie told Mitch that if he had a chance to have another child, because he already had children, that he would have wanted Mitch to have been his son.
Yeah.
And it's like, that made me tear up. Like showing that how much Mitch meant to him. It's like he looked at him like a son, like he was family, and that was really moving. And just how he faced his death with such dignity and strength that it's like that you hope that you can be able to do that yourself if you were in that kind of a situation. It's like succumbing to such a horrible disease. It's like it's like and just what Mitch Albom like got from it as far as looking at how he lived his life and the stuff about his relationship with his brother who was overseas and battling cancer and basically pushing him and the rest of the family away and not not being in communication very much and him wanting to be there and not understanding and then Morrie helping him understand like just that's how he's dealing with it, just give it time, but eventually it's like when you get the chance you'll be able to talk to him and that was nice that he was able to finally have a good conversation with his brother and kind of like really mend things and make, because he was worried is he going to die without me being able to say goodbye or tell him I love him, and it's like not knowing how he's doing. So that was really moving too, and just like the conversation about looking at life and stuff about like what's really important, like who you are, where your priorities are. It's like how you should be looking at stuff without having to face death and face to make you realize, oh wait a minute, like reassess where your life is. And that's what he took from all his experiences visiting Morrie and spending time with him and having those conversations with him. Just a really powerful book, and it's like I always heard about how like amazing this book was. It's like, and I've never read it. It's like, and this book's been around for over 25 years now, and it really hit, and it was a really great experience to read that, and I got a lot from it, and it's like, so it was like I really enjoyed it. Very, very powerful, very moving.
And there was so much to talk about this book that we didn't even really fully cover his brother. Yeah, that part was
Peter, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that hit there too, especially in the part of his uncle who passed away, and then the reason he put just so much like nose to the grindstone of working hard is because he thought that he himself was gonna get cancer, and he's like, it didn't hit me, it actually hit my brother. And it reminded me a little bit of like the comedian Taylor Tomlinson. Her mother passed away from cancer when she was younger, and she said the reason why she like went so hard and worked so hard and has worked so hard is because she's fearful that she herself is going to get cancer and die. So she's like, I got to experience life and do all of these things before I die. And so I was thinking about that in the sense too of the I was getting the references from like other people that are later in life that I've learned about, that I'm like, oh, that fearfulness of cancer, that's something to that. Like I have family members who passed away from cancer. So it's like, I got cancer on one side, I got heart disease on the other.
We've all
it's a crapshoot.
Oh, the other thing that I really found interesting was that how like circumstances allowed him to reconnect with Morrie, even though he hadn't talked to him since he graduated from college. That he just happened to turn on the TV when he was being interviewed about, like that, he's got ALS and he's dying, and just being like, oh my God, it's like, and so it's I love here, like, it's like and plus the stuff with like where he was working, that the newspaper, that there was the strike going on, so he had a lot more free time outside of doing some of the other stuff he did for sports reporting and stuff. That those two things coming together that allowed him to be able to reconnect with Morrie and be able to spend that time with him before he died.
Such a crazy coincidence, dude.
Yeah,
so crazy of a coincidence.
Yeah, it's like he said, like if I hadn't turned on that TV that day, I wouldn't have known that. It's like, and it's like he would have missed that opportunity. That you can see how much it changed his whole outlook on life and everything. So that's like really powerful.
What do you think of this book makes it stand the test of time?
Just because you can, what he's going through, Morrie, and also Mitch's album as well, is something that so many people can relate to from either their own personal experience, and just all that. It's like what was happening is something that is just universal. It's like it's like he said, he goes, we're all slowly dying. It's like one day, we're all going to die. It's like, when it happens, we don't know. But how you live your life and how you deal with that is what's important. It's like, are you satisfied? Are you like, are you living your life? Are you happy? Do you like what you're doing? It's like, and look, really focusing on like what's really important.
Right.
Instead, it's not about how much money you make and your particular possessions. It's about who you are, the relationship you have with your friends and your family. And are you fulfilled? Are you happy? It's
right.
like, it's something that everyone can learn something from.
And before we let you go, because we got to bring other Discord members up, shout out your show, talk about your show, and let the people know.
Well,
I'll step away and let Justin do this real quick.
Well, Josh and I, every week, usually every Thursday night at 9 Eastern time, here on the channel, we have our Ruckus Wrestling Show, where we talk the world of professional wrestling, which is something that Josh and I both have a shared love and passion for. So it's like, if you're into wrestling, whether it's the big companies like WWE or AEW, or just like small independent wrestling, past or present, and we talk about what's going on. It's like review the latest news and stuff with the weekly TV shows and the big shows like WrestleMania and stuff. We just did a watch along of the big Royal Rumble show, which is one of the big shows of the year for WWE. So, and that was a lot of fun. So yeah, so check us out usually every Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern time.
All right, thank you so much, Justin. And it looks like Josh just came back, so it was the perfect amount of time. Perfect timing.
I'm pretty sure you promoted the Ruckus Wrestling so well, Justin. You're amazing.
He did.
Yeah.
Well, you have a good rest of your night, Justin. And
thanks, you guys.
bye.
Always a pleasure, dude.
Bye.
And then we're going to bring on Brennan, the Mystical Mar. We love Brennan over here. Brennan, how are you doing?
Hello.
Hey, Brennan.
Hey.
Brennan, what are your thoughts on this book? We saw that you said what a great read earlier, but if you want to go further into your thoughts and everything that you got out of this book.
Well, this was something that a lot of the kids I went to high school with read this in their English class. I didn't, for some reason. Our class didn't do this one. And I didn't really know what it was about until I read it last month. And it's a great book. I mean, it really is. I think that Morrie's philosophy of life is a lot like mine in terms of how he deals with the trouble he faces.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have ALS, but I think I can relate to some of the things that he goes through. And also, it's always good to read a story about a teacher who had an influence.
Yeah.
Because I think we all had those.
Yeah.
And I certainly did. And just a wonderful read, not a long book, but very poignant. And I think, as you guys were saying earlier, and as Justin said, it's a look about what matters.
Yeah.
The things that really matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
And we didn't get into this part too because it is about a teacher that has impacted Mitch's life. Who's a teacher that has really impacted your life and pushed you to think differently or pushed you to do things in a different way?
That's a tough one. I think it was my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Rucker, was just a great guy. Is a great guy. I was always a kid with an overactive imagination. And he was really cool about facilitating that. And yeah, and also my first grade teacher, Mrs. Lavelle, she had me and all my siblings.
Oh wow!
And yet again, another teacher who was able to connect with me on that level. I think we all have those particular teachers that stand out. And then high school, I had a few, and college as well. So it really is. There's a lot that I could name.
Right. There's so many good teachers out there. I have a college professor that I would have never read the Watchmen comic if it wasn't for that college professor.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was our English 200 class.
It's one of the. I don't care if it's a comic. It's one of the best books I've ever read.
It is absolutely.
Yeah. And Brandon, let me ask you about this book. So Morrie talked about not dealing with pop culture and just stripping that away because you're so ingrained with everything. Just figuring out where you are with, who are the people that you love around you. You don't understand what you have because you're too preoccupied with the outside world. Right. That's kind of what we got from this book. Now, you and I as a Star Wars fan. Star Wars encapsulates our life, which is technically an outside world. But I think sometimes the outside world of pop culture, as far as Star Wars and like those type of things, can be good. Where do you find that good medium?
Well, I think that the lessons that Star Wars teaches are extremely valuable and absolutely true. And I'm a religious person. I believe in God, believe in those things. That the philosophy of Star Wars, the idea of the Force, the idea of something bigger, I really believe in that. And I think that even though Star Wars is this fictional story, the lessons are very true and very applicable.
Yeah, because that's what I was basically getting at, is the fact that like people are saying, like when you read the book, you're like, and when Morrie was like pop culture, I do kind of push back on that part. It's like pop culture. I'm like, when he says pop culture, I don't think he means pop culture.
I don't think he was meaning that. I think he was meaning because at the time was the OJ trial. and everyone was
gosh.
glued to
Yeah,
their
you were
TV.
distracted from something other than
I
your life.
remember those days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and where
I remember them too.
in the book when they said they were at the house, him and the aide were watching the
Right.
trial
Oh,
and
gosh.
the verdict of the trial, and
I remember
Morrie
that
in the
day.
bathroom. He goes,
Yeah.
"The biggest trial of the century." And
Morrie didn't
Morrie's
give a
on the
shit.
toilet. Yeah.
He literally
Well,
didn't give a shit.
It's better than watching it, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of like the point I was getting at. I was like, when I saw in that book, I'm like, pop culture does, as long as it's well written, like you were saying, and that's why I bring it off to Brennan, because me and Brennan love Star Wars, and Star Wars means a lot and shapes our childhood. But how do you separate from the bullshit and the good pop culture? Long story short.
Yeah, well, the reality stuff and things like that, no. I mean, we were just having, I think, a discussion on. I'm trying to remember if it was this channel or not, about how, those really trashy reality shows. Particularly that one that somebody shared about those, My Husband's Not Gay, or whatever it was called. Nonsense.
The Mormon stuff on TLC.
Well, as a member of the church, I went, okay, these guys are making us look like idiots.
Yeah.
They're making me look like an idiot. And
and I put the comment of if you take everything from a reality TV show and place that, like, all people who are this, then that's stupid, because it's a reality TV show.
That's the reason I asked that.
That's the downside of pop culture. Yes,
is like, that's the pop culture Morrie was talking about. That we don't like.
That's the stuff that's like, ugh.
And that's why I was like, I'm glad you're here, Brennan, so we can differentiate the fact that Star Wars is good pop culture as far as how the storytelling and how it relates to life, even though it's a part of pop culture, and then the Love is Blind pop culture is not something you should pay attention to on that type of stuff.
Yeah, and that trashy stuff. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And Brandon, what was the biggest thing that stuck out to you in this book?
I think just Morrie's outlook on life.
Yeah.
I feel the same. I feel it. I have the same kind of philosophy. So.
Well, Brennan, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Always good to be here.
Thank you
so
to
much, Brennan.
coming on. Thank you for reading the book. Starting this little thing, and all of you guys are like, "Yeah, I'll read with you." So thank you for that. And we will see you next month, and way before that in the Discord, join down below.
Oh yes.
But see you next month for the next book, which we'll tell you guys in a little bit after Discord members. But thank you so much, Brennan.
Good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And next up, he'll have to put his camera on, but we'll have Ryan.
I guess I'll do that.
Hey. Hey, really? A Chiefs fan? Damn it. We're trying. We're trying.
So bracket buster, I'm just trying to sub in for your co-host who isn't here, because he's all he's
trying.
In City.
Now we have two of you? Jesus Christ.
I mean, that's how I win. That's how I win the brackets, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you did win. So.
I did. So yeah, you didn't have to wait like a year or so to actually, see my face. As I know that was an issue for some other folks. But yeah, I'm glad we kind of started this up, because I haven't really done this whole entire book situation.
Well, I see some tabs there.
I know. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things as I going through. It's like, all right, see what made sense, and it was just kind of an enjoyable read. I mean, I literally picked it up on it was like afternoon after work, and I had it read by noon the next day. They're like, I'd already had taken the day off, and I'm like, just kept reading, read that night. Yeah, I was like, it was pretty surprising book. I've heard of it, and the reason why I've heard of it, because watching a CBS Sunday Morning. They had a 25-year basically update about this book. So you got to hear about it. You got to see some of that stuff. So I actually got to learn more about the author than Morrie, but they kind of explained the whole entire deal and all the stuff that he's been up to in those 25 years and how important this Morrie was to the author and just continuing. It was just, yeah, it was a good read. I was glad that it was on the option because I'm like, I only read as much as I do, and it was nice to actually read something I recognized because I did not read it in high school. I did not read it whenever. But I've heard of it, and it was just very relatable. I think I've related more into some chapters than maybe chapters you didn't. The two of you didn't because you were talking about earlier about. I am married. I've been married for a while now. So, I mean, some of those things that, when, things are pretty crappy, it's helpful to have somebody here help you. And because they're kind of stuck with you or vice versa, you're there to help them. And it's pretty handy. And instead of sitting solo by yourself. Now, not dealing with death or anything like that at this point, but, you can feel pretty crappy and just being able to say, hey, can text somebody like, hey, can you get me this and this, and just so I don't have to get out of bed, all those kind of things. But
so, which of the lessons, other than like the marriage one, did you relate to the most?
A lot of it was the more of the not being so worked up about things. I mean, he's like, obviously he was focused on love and just caring about other people. I mean, he's going through stuff. I don't remember which chapter it was, but he's going through all this stuff, but then he's reading these things, reading things in the newspaper, and he's tearing up because of it. And it's halfway across the world. Like, I mean, his bubble is pretty small. I mean, in that house, and you're looking out a window, and it's getting less and less. But he's still paying attention to what was going on, at least early on in the book, and just he cared for these other people because they knew things were not great for them, and he wanted them to be better, and nothing he could do about it. But it really just hurt that he just knew they were suffering, and that just nothing wrong with crying about it, and because he's like, it just it caught him right in the feels.
Yeah, that was crazy. Like, you think about it, like, you read so much about like bad stuff happening on like the Joker in The Dark Knight is like, if I told someone was going to die halfway across the world, no one would care. And then if I told you your loved one was going to die, everyone would lose their minds. Morrie was caring about everyone, in that situation, which was, when I read that, I was like, I really should give a shit, type of thing. But as far as like with Mitch, and I don't know if you can relate to it, but like, do you relate to the fact of like going away from your, like, getting more into your career and then realizing, oh wait, I need to go back to my anchor? And that's what I kind of like looked at it with Mitch, is like, that was my anchor. That was where my land was, and all that stuff.
I'm obviously, I've told some of you that, I mean, I'm out here on the West Coast. I moved out this direction for a career. I didn't move out here for family. All the families in the Midwest, and we realizing it's almost the opposite depending on the situation. Family is anchored to a certain extent, but you'd have to be happy with that family to have that as an anchor. If you're not, obviously you're not trying to be political or whatnot, but if you're in two different mindsets that it just doesn't quite work for you, you want to have a relationship with them, and but it can only take you so far sometimes. And because if you're that different, and that is also helpful to be married to somebody that's have a similar anchor. And so my anchor is more here in this house, and as opposed to other places, career wise or not.
Yeah.
And one thing when reading that, Morrie was very focused on like family and like biological family, like your wife, your parents, your children. But I also took it and put my own like head canon in the like your found family as well. The people who become your family that might not be related to you, that they can also, if we're using Josh's metaphor, can be your anchor as well.
Agreed, because I mean, I have people here. I mean, I have friends that are that live in the cul-de-sac. They have family that are on the East Coast, but we're here, and we're there to kind of take care of each other when whatever is going on. Because hey, 4th of July weekend, we're all kind of hanging out here just because hey, it's we've created our own family. If you don't have your biological family or even other that type of family handy to you.
What was the biggest thing you took from this book that you were surprised that you figured out?
It was just more of the love of the book and the love of Morrie himself, just because they're just how easy you can be bitter with the situation. I mean, this whole book was pretty short, and his actual whole timeline was really short. I mean, there's only
a few months.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense in the situation, but
right. And he could like easily be really bitter that hey, I'm in the summer. Earlier in the summer. I'm still can dance and do all these kind of things. By the time he's passing away, I mean, it is a pretty short amount of time that he didn't be bitter about it. I mean, yes, he mourned for certain things. He let himself mourn in the morning and all that, but still Morrie was Morrie until he just physically couldn't be. And that's one of the things that probably is why, again, this book lasted so long, because it's one of those things that work for depending on where you are in your life. I mean, all of us were closer to obviously the author's point of view. It'll be a while before we get into Morrie's point of view, but it's a book that you're going to be able to take with you for a long amount of time, and just you have a copy of it, and you'll just have different perspectives with it depending on when you're reading it, and that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And before we started recording, because I was talking about the difference of I read this as a teenager and the lessons and my viewpoints on that, and then being a fully fledged adult and having more experiences, and then reading the book again and taking different things out of it. And as you said, because I can reread this book in 10, 20 years and we'll take something else out from it.
Right. I mean, yeah, if you were reading it 20 years ago, it's almost just more of an assignment. You're going to just get what you get out of it, and you're not going to relate to either party. It's just you're like, well, you can relate to it as a story, but then you start putting yourself into these characters. You start these people, and talking about your career and everything you're involved with, and you're just like, yeah, okay, I'm now him, and now, and at some point, I'm going to be him, and you just put it all together, and it's just, as I said, I mean, it was a story from 1994, and it took obviously a little bit to write, but there's not too much that is there that is dated. I mean, so you can hear, you remember about the OJ trial, and I'm like, all right, I think about that and a few of these other things, but that's just, I'll just say 5% of the book. The rest of it is just about a person, about a situation, trying to just work his way through what he's dealing with and doing it the best way he can, and giving his guidance to obviously the author, but everybody else, and the different things I've looked at. It's definitely a lot of people go to those, the book fairs and all that stuff just to get signed to see how it's affected them. And I could see what you have you have the 10-year year edition, you have the 25-year edition. Somebody's going to have the 50-year edition probably.
And hopefully Mitch is around to write another pen, because what she read to me in the 10-year edition and then what I read in the 25-year edition, like he penned it in 2022. So it was like literally like 2 years ago. And you have the 25th or the?
I got the 10. So
yeah, I literally got the 25th, and I read to her like it literally is 2022. Like when he penned and he wrote the letter that he wrote to the publisher of what the book was supposed to be. And it went through the book pretty much. I was like, I stopped reading it to Soul because it was like 4 pages long.
Oh,
because I was like, yeah, it's pretty much the book, but it was how he penned it to the publisher. Of because like no one wanted to buy the book. No publisher wanted to publish it because they're like, who wants to freaking talk about death?
Right.
Yeah, and that part, we only knew that because we read the 10th year one where he writes in that afterward that the only reason that he kept pushing and pushing for it is because he wanted to pay for Morrie's medical bills.
Right.
Whereas you don't get that part in the 25th, but you get then the letter that he sent to publishers. So when you put both afterwards together, you get the full picture.
Right. I also want to know how many gray sweatshirts did Mitch have? Because every other page was like, yeah, I wear the same gray sweatshirt. I'm like, dude, wash your clothes or something. Like, I don't freaking know.
I mean, that's the thing. You're laid up. I mean, no matter what you're only changing so much.
It's college. I understood it, but I'm still want to know because like I was like, as good of a writer as he is, he could at least said like he wore like something else. But Morrie only wore the yellow turtleneck every page in the book on that. But Ryan, last little thing about this book, what surprised you of when you read it?
You already asked that.
I know, but I'm trying to figure out another way to word that, and I can't figure it out. Why you can't see? She said no. What?
Well, I grew up there. I mean, come on. It was
I know.
Deal with like.
Did you watch Mitch on the Sports Reporters?
I'm sure I did. I mean, I definitely recognized him right away when I was watching on the CBS Sunday Morning, and I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. And oh yeah, so I've seen him, and I've plenty for years. So that's not even the issue with Mitch. But I mean, I was more surprised at just Morrie in general because it was the best way I could describe it. What was surprising was I read the book, I read it really quickly, and then it made me go online to look up more about him. What you played, I watched all three of the episodes. I rewatched the CBS. I mean, it was just I wanted to. I just wanted to take Koppel, all three of those. I just wanted to watch as much as I could, just more though. And then after I read the book, I was like, I was able to relate those stories that was in the book with what we were seeing on those stories. And then what I found interesting, not in the book or anything, it was just how much this book means to so many people and the funds that come from this book, because I know it's a 50-50 split with the family, because again they were using it to pay the bills and everything, so and then the other 50% is for Mitch, and he's able to use that money to do so much work, so much charities. He's going out, and that is even a bigger part of what his life has become and he wouldn't have been able to do any of this without that, and I mean, Morrie's helping him through his life for many different ways, and it's just going to keep going.
And Morrie's legacy lives on.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about Morrie is he sought that he foresaw the fact of like, I know I'm doing something right, and I'm touching the right lives to make sure that my philosophy and my goodwill lives on. And that's what we're getting through this book. And we're still talking about it in 2025 and talking about the 25th edition. It was published in 1994, but that relationship in the book really started in the 1980s.
Oh, yeah.
So
I know.
70s. He was in school in the 70s.
Yeah, because I mean, I have, you're talking, you're asking others about teachers that mean things to you. I mean, high school, I had a speech and theater teacher that, I mean, that person meant so much to me, and it was an everlasting thing. And I mean, and then after you graduate, I went back after a while to for that connection for different things, but still eventually you do fade out because I got my own stuff, and they have their own thing, but they're still a part of you, and no matter how many years later, some of them were just that important to you that it was a part of just building you up as a person and creating like, okay, who's the person you want to be, and you take that part of that from that teacher. And that's, as I say, I have that. He had Morrie.
Yeah, that's the question I actually meant to ask instead of repeating the question that I asked you before. Was who was your mentor in college that you can relate to that Mitch did with Morrie? Because I myself, Soul knows there's a student affairs office in Western, and I live there, and that's where all my mentors were. And after reading this book, I'm like, man, and she might know this guy, but I was like, man, I need to like getting back in touch with Charlie Pratt, because he was the head of like student affairs. And he still is, and he was the one that's like I would every time between classes I would go there and I would just hang out in those offices and just talk to him and a couple other people, but mainly him, and he would just gradually just open the store. I would just hang out there and I would talk about just life, and it was like, and I was reading this book, I'm like, oh shit, it's me and Charlie Pratt like in that situation.
Yeah, it's good to have that. I mean, as that, and it's going to be something that even if you don't connect up with them, that it'll always be a part of you. And if you're able to have that opportunity to reach back, depending on what you're doing, find a way to get yourself in there just to be able to converse and just to catch up, because you never know. They've, as I said, some instructors, they like you reaching back out, especially if you're that close with them during that time. They're they'll think about you.
Yeah.
I was weirdly thinking, and it kind of like, I was just like, oh, that's a weird thing. Like all of the teachers that really affected me in life, or that high school and college, were all English teachers. And I am not in English at all. Like I'm in healthcare and data. Like, so it's very much math and science is where my realm of my expertise. And so it's funny to think that like, yeah, every teacher that like I would spend time with outside of class or that left an impact were all English teachers.
It might be that personality trait for that type of a teacher. I mean, some are very, it's all about the numbers, and some more about the relationship. So it's really important just to get those people that, work out for you.
Yeah, because I mean, Morrie was a sociology professor, so it kind of lined up pretty perfectly of the type of professor he was. Charlie Pratt is head of student affairs, so he deals with a lot of social stuff, and he understands of like helping you out with your career or just talking with people. And yeah, your mathematical people are very finite. There's an end game every single time. There's no bullshit. You can't bullshit math, unfortunately.
Right. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts on this book? Because it seems you are the last one of the Discord members. Gift didn't want to show his face, I see.
Again, he did it once. Ryan saw it.
I did. I gave this before other people, which was kind of funny. And I'm like,
I know. You were like the first one of all of us to see his damn face. We've known him for like 4 years.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. At least you get me pretty quick.
You broke GIF out of his shell. I'll put it that way. That's something you can put on your put a plaque on your board. I broke GIF out of his shell.
There. Sounds good.
Yeah. No, the government knows what GIF is now.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen some few of those. But yes, I was glad to have this. It's not usually something I would about this book. A book that I would tend to read just on my own. I'm glad it was something that was decided, for me in essence. So that's the good thing about the book club. You just kind of jump things on. More looking forward to next month's. I actually got it from the library today, coincidentally. Nice. So I'll have that one ready to go. A little bit longer book, but I'm enjoying this. I'm glad we're able to make this work and just increase the attendance as we go.
Yes, thank you so much, Ryan.
Glad to have you here, man.
All right.
You have a good rest of your night, and talk to you soon.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye. We have such good Discord members. Why aren't you a part of the Discord if you're watching? Links down below.
Yeah.
But should we reveal February's book?
Do it.
We have The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is sci-fi. This is multiverse. So we're going very different.
Yeah.
Thoughts on our pick for February?
As a comic nerd, sure. As the fact that it's like a total 180 from the philosophical Tuesday with Morrie, yeah, it's a little different. But that's the part of the book club, is because it can't just be the same, just hit you in the face with life and death and all that other shit. So I accept it because I have to, because it was voted on by our Discord. It was a democratic thing. I wanted bleachers, much less the Tunnel Run book that GIF wanted. But I will read it because I enjoy, especially this episode. Great kickoff for the first episode, by the way. So I'm looking forward to the next episode, looking forward to the next book, and enjoying it with our Discord.
And if you want to join us for the Space Between Worlds, literally join our Discord. It's free. We vote on the books March going forward. We'll put that poll out and later in the month. But yeah, this is February. We're going in the world of sci-fi, and it is a democratic election. We'll see what happens, what genre we go into next. But
just we kept it away from political stuff today. Next month we might go political. We don't know, depending on the book. Justin, thank you. Great show tonight. And then thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin. But Josh, any final thoughts on Tuesdays with Morrie or the Space Between Worlds or this book club or anything that you just want to get off your chest?
Well, Tuesdays with Morrie, again, obviously it's the end of the episode, so fuck you for making me read this, because we had to go do that. No, but this book is amazing. I can't recommend it to anyone, because I think anyone in any age, in a sense, as long as, not the Mitch Hedberg joke about like any book is a children's book the kid can read. Like, no, this is a pretty heavy book. It is. So I would probably suggest it to maybe 16 and above. Would you say? Maybe.
I mean,
with this type of subject, as far as like, because I think
if you're in high school, I think it's fine. Also, I'm very much of like if you're a parent, you should know what your kid is reading, and you should know what your kid is capable of taking in, kind of thing. So like if your kid's in middle school, I feel like they could read it in middle school too. They're not going to fully get it, but I don't think there's anything bad about it.
No, it's nothing inappropriate in the book.
Yeah, there's nothing inappropriate in the book. It's at what age are you going to get the most value out of this book? I think a person in their 30s is probably going to get the most value out of it. If you're relating to Mitch. And then maybe a person later in life, or if you get diagnosed with, even if you are younger, you get diagnosed with something that is fatal, like this would be an important book because you'll be relating more to Morrie. So like as a child, you're not really going to be relating to either of them because you don't have the life experience, but I still think there's a lot of good lessons in it, even as a kid, that you can take in that can shape your life and where you want to go in life. Like, because at the age of 18, even though we're legally adults, we're still children, and we have to choose what we want to do for the rest of our life and pick a major and all that stuff. So we already put a lot of things on a lot of decisions on children at a young age. So having a book like this that might be able to help you make those decisions, because you can focus on more important things in life than money, fame, all this other distractions. So I would say middle school, high school.
Yeah, because the thing is, I think this book should be written every 10 years of your life, or like read every 10 years, not written, every 10 years of your life. So because you're going to relate to it differently.
Yeah.
Because of, like, as far as like the discussion we had on our Discord as well, is like I've just realized, like, and the fact that this book is stood the test of time is because everyone relates to it differently. Even Mitch is pinning it differently every anniversary, not just to make money and to help Morrie's family, but it also is from a different situation and from where he wrote the book. So it's like this is just that's why I'm like the main thing is like this book will stand the test of time because people will read it. I want people to read it when they're 20. I want people to read it when they're like every 10 years. Just read this book, basically.
So that is Josh's advice there. But yeah, as I said, next month, or really this month because we're in February, we're reading The Space Between Worlds. We will go live the first Friday in March to speak about this. Join us pretty much Monday through Thursday. We go live. Although right now you guys are doing game dues on Wednesdays, but sometimes they go live on Tuesdays. We have something going on, and mostly you get to see his face because he's on every single live. Every single
one day I'm trying to get our Discord and our Patreon enough to where we have other people than me, but I like doing what I do, so
yeah.
You get me. So if you hate me, congratulations, you get me all the time.
Well, anyways, thank you, Josh, so much for doing this with me, and thank you and Tushka for allowing me to do this. Be like, you know what? I like to read books, and I'm going to force other people to read with me.
Oh, darn. How dare you make us read?
And then, we didn't show this picture. We'll leave on this. This is a picture of Mitch and Morrie.
Yeah. Oh.